Hello and welcome to the dungeon. I'm your host Rob. In today's video we're going to be taking a look at my favorite bard spells from 4th to 6th level. Also though, before we get into things, I wanted to apologize for not getting a video out last week. I kind of had some issues with doctor's appointments and stuff like that. Everything's fine, but kind of, sort of been a mess of the week. So anyway, this week will hopefully be better. Well, it's already better because we're making a video and, we'll try to stay on track. Anyways, so we already talked about 1st to 3rd level. I did miss slow though. I want to mention somebody complained in the comment section that they like slow better than hypnotic pattern or fear. That's a perfectly valid opinion. Slow doesn't have friendly fire and it's amazing. And I probably just looked over the list too quickly and just hadn't noticed it there. I happen to like slow a lot. That was not, intentionally left out. Anyways, but whatever. I'm only human. I make mistakes. So, Moving on. Level 4 spells. Again, in no particular order, just, some of my favorites. We have Polymorph. Polymorph is great as a buff for an ally. It can be a great debuff to try to weaken powerful enemies. I personally like it better as a buff because then there's no saving throw involved. But it's pretty good. Polymorph is amazingly powerful at 7th level when you first get the spell. It is quite excellent. It does sort of taper off a little bit as you start to get to higher and higher levels, but still remains a very useful spell to have. So it's one that I never really regret having ever. Next we have Greater Invisibility. The reason I don't consider the invisibility spell to be amazing is because Greater Invisibility is just so much better. And it's not that invisibility is bad by any means, it's a fine spell. It's just Greater Invisibility does everything we wanted invisibility to do plus more, and doesn't constantly break on you when you do one action kind of thing. I love Greater Invisibility. The Bard in my Whitespire campaign really abused the heck out of Greater Invisibility by constantly turning invisible, and then because he'd taken Counterspell as one of his magical secrets, he could counterspell enemy spellcasters, but they couldn't counterspell him unless they could see him, which they usually couldn't because he was invisible. Now, they did fight some things with True Sight as the campaign went on, so it didn't work throughout, but it was amazingly effective. It was just ridiculous, actually. Anyways, Greater Invisibility, I love this spell. It's great on martial characters. It's great on casters. It's just great, period. Dimension Door. This is one I would definitely not pick it ahead of, Greater Invisibility, probably, personally. But a lot of times, just that added mobility and the ability to teleport and stuff can really help to problem solve things. It's pretty useful in combat, but where I find these kind of spells really shine is, trying to troubleshoot my way through different traps and things that the dungeon master may have designed in the dungeon. That's where I really love Dimension Door. Overall, it's still a great spell. The extra mobility is never bad. It is kind of a hefty price, 4th level spell slot, but still really good. Freedom of movement. There are certain characters in the party who aren't going to care, right? You've got a ranger using a bow. He probably doesn't really care that much if he's getting slowed or if he has difficult terrain. On the other hand, there are characters who care a lot. And, lasts an hour, no concentration. It's really, really nice. Speaking of magical secrets, I did a video not too long ago talking about contingency. And because Freedom of Movement is not on the wizard spell list, but it is on the bard spell list, one thing I had suggested was taking Freedom of Movement on, either on a bard by taking contingency as a magical secret, or on a wizard by using a ring of spell storing or something along those lines, right? Because the truth is, Freedom of Movement is just a very, very powerful and useful buff spell. Not necessarily compatible with wizards by default, since they're the only ones with contingency, but they don't have Freedom of Movement. But, Still really good. However, even without contingency, freedom of movement is a great spell, especially if I know I'm going to be fighting like certain types of enemies, right? Like I'm going into the Underdark and we're probably going to be fighting a lot of drow. Well, there could be driders. That could be a thing that I'm worried about, you know? So there could be those type of situations where I'm just like, you know what? We're going into the big fight. I'm going to cast freedom of movement on our, main martial melee guy. And, no concentration. So nothing to worry about there. Anyways, confusion. Confusion is generally weaker, in my opinion, than, say, like fear or hypnotic pattern are. Since those are both kind of similar in some ways. It has a smaller area of effect. You can't control what the effect is going to be. So I didn't used to be a very big fan of confusion, but these days I've come to appreciate it a lot more just because you start fighting so many things that are either immune to the fear condition or the charmed condition, and confusion doesn't have those restrictions on it. I still don't think it's necessarily the best crowd control spell in the game, but it is really solid, so it's definitely at least worth mentioning. Hallucinatory terrain. I've had mixed results with this spell personally because some dungeon masters, don't like you pulling off weird effects with like lava or whatever in hallucinatory terrain. I don't know why. That's kind of the purpose of the spell, But, if you're creative with illusions, then there can often be some really big gains. It's a spell, though, that is a little harder and a little more dependent on the situation you're in. So again, it wouldn't be like my absolute, I'm level 7, I get 4th level spells, boom. It would not be one of those type of picks. I don't like to say polymorph, but still good. And Charm Monster. Charm Monster is, again, quite powerful, but we are starting to get to those levels where things start having good saves and magic resistance and legendary saves and things like that, which do kind of impact how useful Charm Monster can be. But that said, it still can be really handy in the right circumstances. So it's one that, again, I wouldn't rush out and grab as soon as I get to 4th level spells, but it's one that I'm going to keep in the back of my mind that, hey, maybe I'm going to want to pick this up at some point. Anyways, those are my real standouts for 4th level. Level 5. Animate Objects. I love this spell. It's just so much fun, especially when I cast it on things like, a bunch of coins. Like I'll have my coin purse and I animate a bunch of coins and they can attack and stuff. Ironically, Animate Objects works best when you're not dealing with like one big giant hulking statue or something, which would have been a good intuitive choice usually, but usually lots of smaller objects, tiny and small, that tends to be where to go. Either way, Animate Objects is a great spell, can do a lot of damage, and because it, persists round after round if you're still concentrating on it, it's a damage spell that, is going to pay off round after round after round, unlike, a one-shot type spell, right? Speaking, though, of great damage spells, next on my list we have Synaptic Static. Bards don't have a lot of good, like, AoE damage spells by default, but we do get Synaptic Static, which is a great spell. It's an intelligence save, which is usually the best saving throw to target on a monster. Like I said, it's an AoE, but it also has like damage, plus has a debuff where, and it doesn't require concentration by us, but it penalizes monsters' saving throws and whatnot, including like concentration saves potentially, ability checks, that kind of stuff. Overall, I really love Synaptic Static. It is just a premium AoE damage spell in my opinion, because it isn't just the damage, it does so much else on top of that. Anyways, next I put down Raise Dead. I like Raise Dead. I like being able to resurrect a dead party member if they have died. That is very useful. But if I have somebody else in the party who already has the spell, I'm probably not that worried about it. Granted, if you have a cleric and the cleric dies, now maybe you're in trouble. But, if you ever Revivify between somebody, you're probably going to be all right as a backup. In general, though, somebody in the party better have Raise Dead, just in case, It's one of those spells that you always want to have but never want to need. But, sometimes the inevitable happens and someone just dies. And somebody has to be able to resurrect that person. Anyways, And along similar lines is Greater Restoration. Greater Restoration is very nice. But again, we might have somebody else in the party can cast it. We might even have it on like a, domain spell list, for example, in which case I don't have to worry about it ever. That's perfect for me. Then I can concentrate on the other spells I did want. But if nobody has it, then I might want to pick it up. This is one of the things about bards, is you can really kind of like fill in with just a spell or two here to cover for like little holes in the party. I still like the idea of, kind of having like a role that I want to fulfill, not just kind of, try to be everything all at once. But bards are definitely better at that than pretty much anybody else, And so if you do have like, oh, well, we don't have, somebody to raise dead, well, I guess I'm going to take that. We don't have mass cure wounds. I guess I'm going to take that, We don't have synaptic static. I'm taking that. Anyways, mass cure wounds also made my list. I guess I might as well mention it right now since I just mentioned it a second ago. Again, if we have like somebody who's intent on healing the party, then that's probably not going to be me. And I'll still have healing word, for example, just because it's so useful, like I mentioned in the last video. But I probably won't go heavy on the heals. But if I do have to, then I've got it available. And bards are pretty decent healers, so nothing wrong with that. Hold Monster. Again, Hold Monster is very, very powerful if it lands. It is one of these all or nothing spells, though, which can be pretty difficult when things get legendary resistances and magic saving throw, like advantage on magic saving throws, magic resistance, that kind of stuff. I tend to like these spells better on, let's say, like a sorcerer, where they can like hide and cast it and give them disadvantage. A little less of a crapshoot then, but the effect is so powerful it is still at least worth mentioning, right? Hold Monster is still quite good. Then we have some kind of situational ones, but they are really powerful under those circumstances. Again, these aren't spells that I'm going to rush out and grab, but I might want to like add them to the repertoire in case I want to round things out a little more. And the first one is Rory's Telepathic Bond. So this can be really nice if we need to be able to telepathically communicate without other people hearing us. Can be very, very handy, and it's a ritual, which I like. Now, if we have a wizard in the party and he has this, then I'm not going to worry about it again, right? But if we don't, then, it might be nice for somebody to have. And then we have Seeming, which is honestly one of the best, kind of party group illusion spells available in the game. And it's one that I find pretty handy as well. But, like I said, I find that illusion spells can really vary in the, in your bang for your buck, I guess, how much value you get from them, depending on your dungeon master, depending on player creativity, things like that. If you cast Fireball, it just does the damage. If you use an illusion, sometimes the dungeon master's like, well, this or that, or, whatever else, right? I've run into those situations multiple campaigns with different dungeon masters, so I know it's not just one guy. So, that's why I always mentioned it. I personally like illusions, but I know some people aren't big on them because they're like, yeah, my DM isn't really fond of us using a lot of illusion spells. They think it's kind of like, hacking the game almost, which it is, but that's the point of illusion spells. Come on. Anyways, so Telepathic Bond and Seeming. Finally, we have our 6th level spells. Well, not finally. Finally for this video. You know what I'm saying. I find that a lot of the Bard's 6th level spells tend to be quite situational. Where 5th level, I feel like they have a lot of really top tier choices. 6th level, it's like you've got some really strong choices, but not a lot of absolute go-tos. You do have Mass Suggestion, which is one of my favorites. So that's on the list. Although, again, that's one where dungeon masters sometimes aren't big fans of the spell, so your, experiences may vary. Eye Bite, I quite like. You got 3 different debuffs that you can use on the person. It gives you some options when you want to cast a spell. It's not like one of these spells where you have it and then you're like, oh, I can't use it on this target because it's a fear-based spell or whatever, and they're immune to fear, It's one where you can kind of pick and choose the effect you want when you cast a spell. And I generally find it to be pretty good. Again, single targets are not always the best, but, you know, at least reasonable value. We have Otto's Irresistible Dance, which is quite good. My only real problem with Irresistible Dance is that it is a 6th level spell slot, so these things ain't cheap. Still, though, it is a pretty good spell, so it makes the list. And then we have True Seeing. This is like the ultimate in situational spells. I've gone campaigns where we never needed it. I've gone dungeons where we needed it like 12 different times. So it just depends on the circumstances. So I do like True Seeing a lot, but again, 6th level spell slot, that's not cheap. Finally, we have Hero's Feast, which is an amazing spell. It's also rather expensive to cast, though, so unless you're like, incredibly rich, you may not want to be casting it all the time. However, I will say, Hero's Feast is one of my favorite go-tos for using with a wish spell. So, we finished our adventuring day, and I'm like, I never used my 9th level spell slot all day. I've still got wish available. I'm going to wish to cast a Hero's Feast. No ingredients, no casting time, except for one action. And, then I take a long rest, and I've got my wish spell back again. So, Hero's Feast is a very, very powerful spell. It's even better when you don't have to pay for it. But, as a bard, you're not going to have wish unless you took it as one of your 18th level magical secrets. And that's not always going to be available because the campaign probably won't go to 18th level. But if it does, keep in mind. And to be fair, you're already 13th level, or 11th level, I guess, sorry, in order to cast 6th level spells. So, there's a chance it could get that high. Anyways, though, those are my top tier picks for 4th, 5th, and 6th level spells. I'm going to make another video for 7th, 8th, and 9th. I might do another one for magical secrets. To be honest, I did a magical secret video a long time ago. It was one of the early videos on my channel. But I think that might have been pre-Xanathar's even, let alone Tasha's and, Fizzbands and everything else, right? So updating that with a newer version to account for newer spells is probably not a bad idea. Plus, some of my views on spells have changed a little bit as I've used them more and more in different campaigns or seen them used in the campaigns I've run. Sometimes what looks great on paper is only so-so at the table, and what you think is that's okay, but would I ever use it? And then you end up using it all the time, and you're like, man, what was I thinking? This spell's great. So, that kind of stuff does happen, right? Anyways, that's everything. Thank you for watching. Feel free to like, subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, and most importantly, leave me your comments in the comment section. I read every single comment I get, even if I don't always respond, and I will see you next time. Bye.